Alright, so I'm doing a bit of an early stream today. I'm going to probably stream in two parts, like a quick stream earlier this afternoon, so it's about 2 p.m. here, and then later on this afternoon when I usually get on, so this evening around 5, 6 p.m. ish, somewhere in there. And what I've decided to do for the earlier part is play some Cold Waters. Now, I had to do a quick test run of this earlier to make sure that my mods weren't broken, because there have been some updates since the last time I played, but everything seems to be working fine. So for those who haven't played Cold Waters, it's kind of in that spot between a simulator and an arcade game. If you happen to catch the submarine test for War Thunder, it's more realistic than that, but it's not Silent Hunter levels of realism. You get a third-person view of your submarine. The controls are quite simplified. You can WASD your submarine around, actually. So it's a bit more casual than a really, really hardcore sub-sim, which is probably good for me. Otherwise, I would be absolutely hopeless. But it does have in-depth enough mechanics that it mimics how actual submarines behave in many ways. So a lot of things that work on an actual submarine also work in the game, but there's some things that work in the game which shouldn't. But for what it is, it's pretty neat. My only real complaint about the game is that it doesn't have multiplayer, because playing this in multiplayer I think would be an absolute blast. But it does have single-player campaigns where your actions affect the execution of said campaigns. It has two theatres of war, so you have the North Atlantic and North Sea and Arctic Circle kind of region up here where you can see on the map. And then you also have the South China Sea. And there was not a recent patch, I think it dropped a couple of years ago, but there was a patch which added playable Chinese submarines as well as playable Soviet submarines. There were already mods to make Soviet subs playable, but they actually added it as a base game feature. Now, I am running some mods which add extra units, and because there's no way to edit models in this game yet, they're hard-coded in for some reason that is beyond me. It's actually kind of funny. It's a lot like the old days of modding IL-2 1946, where people would hack together really Frankenstein-y aircraft using parts of different aircraft. You get the same thing going on in this game. So you might see something that bears a resemblance to a particular submarine but doesn't quite look right, and that's why the modders have had to take parts from different submarines and mishmash them together in ways that look close enough at a distance. But the sub I will be playing in this mission, along with the ones we'll be playing against, are all base game submarines, so we won't encounter that issue. So what I've done is I've gone ahead and set up a basic quick mission rather than trying to use the editor, which I have no clue how to use. We're in the Arctic Circle, north of Norway. It's the 4th of April 1977. I've just got time, weather, sea state, all of that set to random. So I'm going to have a bit of a surprise once I jump in. And our mission is to intercept an incoming US Navy task force. It's not a very big task force. It's only expected to be a couple of frigates, maybe a cruiser, and possibly some submarines. So we're not dealing with like a full-blown aircraft carrier battle group or anything, but it should be enough ships to make things challenging for us as a lone submarine. Now, given the time period, and given that this is a mission where we've been sent to intercept NATO forces quite close to Murmansk, relatively speaking, we're going to be in an alpha, the Lyra, as the Soviets knew it, which I think was Project 705, I'm pretty sure. For those that aren't real well versed on submarines, the Alpha class, as it was called by NATO countries, was an incredibly nimble submarine, very small, very highly automated. It had a crew of about 30 who lived and operated within the center compartment of the submarine. Most of the submarine systems were automated. The entire rear half of the submarine was basically sealed from the crew and would only be accessed in port for maintenance. It was powered by a liquid metal reactor, as opposed to your standard sort of pressurized water reactors that most submarines use. And the advantage of this was that it put out a tremendous amount of power in a very compact system. The problem was that you have to keep the thing running hot, otherwise the coolant, which is lead bismuth, will freeze in the pipes, and then the entire system is fucked. You've got to bin the entire reactor compartment and put in a new one. And that did actually cause the early decommissioning of a couple of the Alpha class boats. So when in port, they were supposed to be kept hooked up to I believe it was a steam generation system within the port itself. So the Alpha class submarines had their own special ports that they were laid up in. But as the Soviet economy began to deteriorate and priorities shifted and maintenance didn't get done, an issue which is still plaguing the Russian Navy today, a lot of the thermal generators failed, and so they would instead just run the submarines hot the whole time, which in turn led to increased wear on the reactors and the submarines as a whole. So although they were incredibly capable machines, they were all decommissioned relatively quickly. I believe most of them were out of service by the mid-80s. What made the Alpha so special, other than being very small and very highly automated, was the fact that this tremendously powerful reactor made it incredibly fast and very agile. The Alpha was capable of 40 knots without particularly straining itself. And for reference, kind of a more average speed for an SSN is about 25 knots, somewhere in there. Anything that could go above about 27 knots was considered fast. So something that can do 40 knots, or they were recorded to be able to sprint at about 43 to 45 knots for short periods, has a tremendous advantage when it comes to maneuvering. The trade-off that you get for this is that the submarine is incredibly loud. So not only can it be heard by anything in the water near it, it also can't hear over itself to figure out what's going on around it. So the Alphas had notoriously poor situational awareness and were not very stealthy. But again, there was another sort of trade-off going on here, that not only were they fast, in fact, they were faster than most torpedoes were able to keep up with, but they were also very maneuverable. So the Alpha could stop from flank ahead and go into reverse faster than most torpedoes could turn. And so you had a submarine which is not only faster than most torpedoes that NATO had in service, but also more agile than them. The submarine could juke a torpedo. And so the Alpha and other submarines like it were, I believe, the primary drive behind the development of the Mark 48 ADCAP torpedo, which is pretty sure still in use today. Their intended role, as their speed might suggest, was interceptors. So essentially it was the same mindset as the MiG-25, just underwater, something that's extremely fast and can get out to where it's needed very quickly, destroy the incoming enemy, and then return to base. So the Alpha-class submarines were not patrol boats. They were not sent out on epic global adventures. They were laid up in port and only dispatched when they were needed, or on particularly important exercises where, they wanted to test them out. But generally speaking, they were found laid up in port and would not depart it unless they'd actually been tasked to intercept something. So I'm going to be dropping in off the northern coast of Norway. So we're going to have some very rugged fjords to our south. And then we should have sort of the edge of the continental shelf within the battle area as well. I'm going to go ahead and start this up, and we will see how it plays out. I should note, I'm not especially good at this game. There's a lot of mechanics I don't fully grasp. I'm interested in submarine warfare, but I'm not well versed in it. I know enough to get myself in trouble, basically. Hopefully, I have not caused this to freeze. Start button, please. Or do I have to actually click? Okay. Excuse me for a minute while I try and figure out what I've done wrong here. And get the mission to actually launch. I'm sure that there is something here that I should be clicking. Or it might be that my mods have somehow broken quick missions, which I hope is not the case, but is entirely possible. There are still some issues with the game, even unmodded. It's undergoing development. And I seem to recall menus occasionally bugging out being one of said issues, but I'm not entirely sure why this won't go. Oh. No. Is that it, perhaps? That doesn't appear to be it. Okay, well, I might have to... that's a pain in the ass. I might have to scrap the quick mission, or at least remake it. Oh, it looks like it saves at least. Hello, yes, can I spawn in, please? Do I need to set myself in here? Nope. Okay. That's really weird. I guess we're just gonna have to do a quick mission. Sorry, guys. We're off to a bit of a janky start already. So what I will do is I'll have a look through the available quick missions. These are all American missions, I believe. Those are Chinese ones. Convoy strike. Okay, we'll try this one. This should be similar enough to what I was trying to do. Except it wants to give me a surface ship. Okay, so those must be surface ship missions. Like I said, I'm running mods here, so I can't be sure what is what exactly. Sorry for the slow start. Problem is, the vast majority of these are NATO missions. I think this is as well. I'll just double check this one and see which nation it is. Yep, that's American. I might just have to go for one of the dual missions if I can't figure out which of these I need. See, I could play as a boomer, but I want to play as a alpha class. We'll just go with the dual to start out with, and then I'll find another mission to continue on with afterwards. And in this case, I can play as the Soviet Navy. So we'll take the Alpha and jump in. Try and close relatively close. Check what we've got loaded. So I want to switch out 2 of my torpedo tubes for decoys. The 5365 is a wake homer, and we're not going to need that because we're fighting a submarine, not surface shipping. And that should do us, I think.
On sonar, new contact bearing 155, designated Sierra 1.
Rig ship for ultra quiet.
Right, so here we are. We are about 300 feet because everything in this game is measured in Imperial because it was originally released as the US Navy being playable. So we're about 90, 100 meters under the water. And we need to figure out what we are up against here. Now that does look like the signature of a small freighter, but we actually should be pitted against a submarine. So we'll have a look through and see if there's any subs with a signature that looks like that. We could be picking up like a composite signature part of the submarine and then something else as well, kind of overlaid. Have a look where he is. He's off the front there, so what I'll do is I'll turn flank onto him.
Come right to 206, helm aye.
So hopefully we will get a better idea of what he is and where he's going.
On sonar, new contact bearing 091, designated Sierra 2.
Okay, we might have 2 friends here. Sierra 2. What's that? Could be a Virginia, because I have got this set to 1984 and that will bring in the more modern stuff.
On sonar, lost contact Sierra 2, last bearing 092.
And whatever he is very quiet. So that is most likely a modern American submarine. You can see here just how streamlined this thing is. Part of what helps it with its incredible speed. The 2 little propellers there are silent running motors. They aren't functional in the game, as in they're not animated, but in real life, when it's in silent running, the main prop would stop, and the 2 little electric thrusters there would start working, and those would propel the submarine. Something has just launched on me.
Make turns for 10.
Since they now know I'm here and are firing at me,
we are cavitating.
I'm going to build some speed to try and get away from that. I'm going to
Con sonar, no longer cavitating.
try and get a decoy torpedo out for that to track on. And then get a very close range active torp towards that second contact,
Con sonar, launch transient from
which is
Sierra
apparently
2.
a skipjack. We're going to speed back up now that we've got the torp away,
Con sonar, we are cavitating.
and drop a bit in depth, because unlike the Americans, we can play with our depth a lot more. The Alpha, as well as being incredibly quick and maneuverable, can also sink to quite an incredible depth without breaching its crush depth.
Con sonar, lost contact. Sierra 3, last bearing 007. Contact is in the
Like
battle.
some of the other more advanced Soviet submarines, the Alpha used titanium quite liberally in its construction, making it very strong and able to sink to pretty impressive depths. Okay, we've got a bunch of contacts here.
Con
So I'm
sonar
going to slow
no
down
longer
a little.
cavitating.
Con, knuckle formed.
Con sonar lost contact. Sierra 2, last bearing 09.
So when we form a knuckle,
5 knots. Maneuvering eye.
what that means is that we formed a disturbance in the water behind the submarine, which is capable of
Con sonar
throwing a
regained
torpedo
contact
off of
on
us.
Sierra 1, bearing 156. Con sonar launch transient from Sierra 2.
Been launched on again. I'm going to drop a
Con
decoy,
sonar, we are cavitating.
pick up my speed, and dive. I'm also going to turn into that threat so I can see it coming a
Passing
little
600
easier.
feet. Passing 700 feet.
Con sonar
I'll level
no
off
longer
here.
cavitating. Con sonar lost contact. Sierra 1, last bearing 1.
Passing 900 feet.
I am using a mod that decreases the underwater visibility. The vanilla game you can see quite easily underwater, although there is a realism setting which will prevent contacts from rendering in 3D until you are at about a 90 to 95% firing solution on them. So in other words, you have to have a pretty good idea of what they are and where they are before you can see them in-game. They'll just appear as icons on the map otherwise. So we have a pretty good idea where these guys are because we've gone active.
Con sonar
I'm
switching
going
to
to
passive
turn
search.
the sonar off now for a minute. We've got a torpedo coming from our front right. So I'm going to slow down for a minute.
Make turns for 5 knots. Maneuvering eye.
Con, torpedo room, tube jammed on launch.
Still going too fast.
Make turns for
You got to really
4,
watch your speed when you
2
try and launch
knots.
torpedoes,
Maneuvering eye.
or they will jam in the tubes. Gonna drop another noisemaker. Turn into those torps, then double back. I'm gonna start reloading the remaining tubes while I'm at it. Can't see where those torps
Knuckle
are.
formed.
I can hear them, but I can't see them.
Passing 900 feet.
Ah, above me.
Passing 900 feet. Passing 1,000
It looks
feet.
like our previously launched decoy might have baited them. So I'm going to slow back down.
Turns for 20 knots. Maneuvering eye.
Hey Nuts, hey Max. Sorry, I didn't notice you guys were in here. My mobile app is fucking up, so I can't read chat. Give me a sec.
Con, torpedo room, tube 3 ready.
Con sonar regained contact on Sierra 1, bearing 169.
Con maneuvering. Making turns for 20 knots.
I think Sierra 1, that target there that we just saw for a moment, is actually a surface target.
Bearing 073. Con sonar, torpedo in the water, bearing 072.
Passing 1,100 feet.
That's getting a bit close for comfort. Okay, so I'm going to slow down again.
Make turns for
Need to get
0
below about 25 knots to launch a torpedo.
Turns for 5.
I'm going to fire off another decoy.
Maneuvering eye. Shoot 2-3. Aye, sir.
And then speed back up so I can try and get away from these.
4, 2 knots. Maneuvering aye.
There we go. Now my phone's awake. Jesus Christ.
Make turns for 20 knots. Maneuvering aye.
Gonna fire a torp over here, make sure it's on active.
Shoot 2-1. Aye, sir.
Pick my speed back up.
Turns for 4, 2 knots. Maneuvering aye.
And double back on my
Passing
course.
1,200 feet.
Con, sonar, torpedo in the water, torpedo in the water, bearing 0, 6, 8.
Passing 1,300 feet.
Might just be able to see the torpedo up
Passing
there.
1,400 feet.
There's two of them actually.
Passing 1,500 feet.
Con, sonar, lost contact. Sierra 1, last
Passing 1,600.
So we're pretty close to the bottom now.
10.
But we're comfortable down here.
Maneuvering aye.
This submarine can easily handle 2,000 feet of water. I've taken it down to about 2,000. That's the deepest I've actually found in the game.
Make turns for
Since usually
4,
it dumps you in
2 knots.
about
Maneuvering aye.
2,000 feet of water if it's going to give you deep water. And the Alpha will deal with that, no worries at all. If the Americans were to try and follow me down here, they wouldn't even make it halfway before reaching their crush depth.
Con, torpedo room, tube 3 ready.
There is a full screen situation map, which I can't actually remember how to open. But I prefer to have the 3D view as well. It's a little cheaty perhaps, because I can actually physically look around where torps are coming from and then WASD the sub away from them, but like I said, I'm not a hardcore sub-simmer, so I kind of need the extra situational awareness. So we're picking up pings from the torpedo over here. We've lost that guy, he's in our baffles, so you can see I'm this little blue square up here, the hollow side is my stern. I'm running almost directly away from contact 1, so I can't hear him because I'm drowning myself out with my own engine noise. This thing is legitimately so loud, it cannot hear anything behind it, or even really to its front while it's moving at flying speed. So I'm going to slow back down to about 10 knots.
Make turns for 10 knots. Maneuvering aye.
We don't have any torpedoes that are immediately threatening us, so we've got some time to play with here. Contact 2.
Regained contact
Oh,
on.
there we go.
Sierra 1, bearing 2.
We've regained contact
0,
1.
0.
So let's see what he is. He's definitely a surface ship, I just don't know what kind. Because we don't have a good enough solution on him. Contact 2 is an American submarine. I believe that's a Seawolf, so that's a very advanced submarine.
Con.
Con, sonar, regained contact on. Sierra 3, bearing 3, 5, 7.
And then the third contact is another surface ship from the sounds of it.
10 knots.
But we don't have enough confidence in what he is to be able to tell where he is.
Con, sonar, lost contact. Sierra 1, last bearing 2, 0, 6. Contact breaking up.
So we sunk one. If I hadn't been almost immediately fired upon by another submarine, I probably wouldn't have just torpedoed some poor innocent
Con,
merchant
torpedo
vessel.
room, tube 1 ready.
But, you know, war is hell and all that. Okay, the Seawolf is belting it away from us. So you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to go catch him up, because he cannot outrun me.
4.
No matter how hard he
knots,
tries, he
maneuvering
cannot outrun me. So I'm just going to head this
Helm
way,
right 2. 1.
at flank,
Helm I.
and nice and deep.
Con, sonar, lost contact. Sierra, 3, last bearing.
Yeah, I do
5,
like the
7,
first person
contact
only
Con, helm,
play style
steady
of Silent
course.
Hunter 3, and I would play it a hell of a lot more, but my install's been broken for years now. I did play the campaign through with the Grey Wolves mod. By play it through, I mean until I died, which took me until about, I think it was April 1940. It was really early in the war. Whenever it was like a couple weeks after Gunter Preen sank the Royal Oak, because my one crowning achievement in that campaign was I snuck a Type 2 U-boat into Scapa Flow and tried to sink the Royal Oak, but didn't account for A, the torpedo nets, and B, the fact I forgot to reset the torpedo computer. So they just launched at a completely sketch angle. Didn't even go near the Royal Oak, so they didn't hit the torpedo nets either. And I was like, oh fuck it, I'm gonna get chased now. So I just started booking it out of there, and I was just passing one of the Churchill barriers. Well, no, sorry, I came in through the Churchill barriers on the east side, and I was passing the subnet on the south side, I think it was. And I'd just kind of gone over the net and was coming back down. It was night when I did this.
2 knots.
And I hear this tremendous explosion, and my sonar man starts telling me he can hear a ship sinking. I'm like, what the fuck could I possibly hit? So this is the one time in the campaign I used the external view for anything other than screenshots while cruising. My torpedoes had completely missed the Royal Oak, missed the torpedo net, gone all the way across Scapa Flow, gone under a massive tanker that was moored up, which if I'd hit that thing, that would have given me tonnage for days. Probably would have given me more tonnage than if I'd hit the fucking battleship. Went under that without going off, and then went off directly under the keel of a destroyer that was moored up alongside it on the other side. And sank the destroyer. Yeah. Destroyers were the bane of my existence in that game. Either because they kept killing me, or because they were the only thing I could manage to kill when I wasn't trying to. Okay. So consider me impressed. This guy is actually able to get up to 40 knots. But this is like a really top-of-the-line modern US nuclear sub. I think these things entered service in like the 90s, maybe, or they might even only have recently entered service. In fact, I'm pretty sure these are current-gen subs because it's got the little cheek arrays on it. So yeah, this is like a current service US submarine fighting a Soviet sub from the early 70s. But it's okay though, because we go really fast. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just blast a torpedo at him once I slow down enough to not jam the tubes,
Make turns
and hope it can catch him up.
knots. Maneuvering I.
I'm really disappointed I couldn't get the actual quick mission to work, because that would have been a much more interesting thing to watch. I would have been fighting things with my own kind of capabilities. Well, not as fast, but with better sensors. Oh god, didn't even notice it. I'm dead. And that's why you pay attention to the situation map. Right in the fucking reactor room. Like I said, I'm not very good at this game. I dodged like 3 torps that were right on top of me, only to die to one that just came out of nowhere at the end there. But there are various fun things you can do in this game, particularly if you understand how the torpedoes home in. You can bait somebody into torpedoing themselves by getting them to fire and then drawing their torpedo towards them and then going into silent running. And you can also kind of control where the torpedoes go with countermeasures. So, like, for instance, I've seen a torpedo do a slingshot around a countermeasure to actually cut the corner on the ship it was chasing. Oh, I'm already dead, dude. I'm fucked. All I've got is this one last sad little torpedo that's probably not even going to catch the Seawolf. Oh, it was Virginia. So that's like a, what, 90s era sub, I think? I'll try this quick mission thing again and see if it works, but I think it might be bugged. It does happen from time to time. I want to make it kind of near the coast, so I've got to fight around land and continental shelves. Why is my cursor tabbing through? It might be because I opened Steam at some point. Sometimes if you open Steam, it causes that to happen. We will try 68 Red vs. NATO. Change the date to, what did I have it, like 4th of April 1977. We'll leave the time as random, weather is random, all that shit is random. Okay, I want to have 2 to 3 knocks. I want to have 1 Belknap, and then we'll have the possibility of coming across some skipjacks. But we can only get the 1968 version. See, that's the problem. The 68 versions are kind of shitty. Like, their torpedoes are crap. I don't even think the Americans have worthwhile homing torpedoes in 68, so we'll change it to back to 84 and just hope it works. So 2 to 3 knocks. Yep. 1 Belknap. Yep. 0 to 2. Skipjacks will go. And that should probably be enough of a challenge in itself. No group of vessels set as active. Oh, whoops, my bad. Yes! It works! Alright. This is what I intended to do. So here's our alpha. The update also lets you, or actually it might be the mod that I have, lets you play some hypothetical designs like the improved alpha, which never entered service. Some experimentals as well. November 2, which is a theoretical design. All the theoretical ones are noted here, so you don't accidentally play one thinking it's historical. But we will take our alpha. And we will see what havoc we can create. Remembering that we have basically no situational awareness, and we're noisy as hell. Okay, let's check our loadout. So I'm going to want some 53-65s, which are my wake homing torpedoes, because those are very useful against surface ships. So I'm going to load a couple of those. The USET 80 I think I might get rid of and load some SET 65s instead. I can't remember the specifics of the SET 65. I think that's the homing torpedo, like the earlier homing torpedo, but I'm not certain. We will load decoys in 2 tubes, wake homers in 2 tubes, and then acoustic torps in 2 tubes. That should do. And then get rid of all of the USET 80s and load those up. So you can edit your loadout here in the mission menu. And then the damage control screen shows you all your different compartments and where damage is once you take hits.
Con sonar new contact bearing 3 1.
Rig shift
Going
for
to
ultra
immediately
quiet.
go into ultra quiet, which is of dubious use in an alpha.
Con sonar new contact bearing 3 0 2. Designated Sierra 2.
Now,
Con sonar new contact bearing.
if you're
2,
really
9,
smart at
9.
submarines,
Designated Sierra
when there's a
3.
strong duct and a strong layer in the water, you can use that to hide and
Con
do all
sonar
sorts
new
of
contact bearing 3
sneaky
3,
bullshit with your
7.
sonar.
Designated Sierra 4.
The problem is, I'm not good at submarines, and even though I've watched a video from an actual US Navy submariner describing how this shit works, I can't remember how it works. So we're just going to play this shit by ear. We're going to go in balls deep. So I've got some contacts here. They're already on active sonar. They're quite a ways out though. The nearest is 20,000 yards away. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to ascend to periscope depth.
Make depth 3, 5 feet, dive by.
I'm also going to change my course.
Come
This
left
way?
to 264, helm I.
So it looks like it's the early morning. Sun's just coming up through the clouds. Sea's relatively calm. There's a little bit of a swell, but not too bad. Okay, we'll put the periscope up. And the ESM master. So that'll tell us if someone's trying to radar us. We can now actually see some of these contacts. So if I look about, what bearing is that? 334. I seem to recall there was a way of moving this thing up and down, but I've forgotten it.
Con, helm, steady course.
Con, dive at 3, 5 feet, dive by.
We'll come up to... not... oh shit, no.
Make depth 3, 5 feet, dive by.
Okay. Forgive me while I try and remember how to do this shit. Whatever, we'll just use the external view since, you know, if you can see it good enough to get a firing solution, it will render in. So, we got a friendly trawler, which is M4. M1 is the one of the Noxes, I think. Yep, that's a Nox. He's 24,000 yards away. Another Nox here. And then that's the Belknap. So M4 is a friendly trawler. We don't want to engage him. So I'm going to get a little closer. If I can just figure out where exactly these guys are going. Looks like they're turning away to, I guess, what would be north. Yep, they're turning away north. So I'm going to bring the sub about towards them.
Come right to 314, helm I.
I'm going to
Lower the ESN
lower my
mast.
masts, make my depth
Depth 250
just below
feet,
the
dive by.
layer. And approach them underneath that. I'm not going to fire my torpedoes just yet. I want to get a little bit closer to give them less time to react, and to make sure the torpedoes don't run themselves out of range. So, what the layer essentially does is it's a difference in temperature between the two layers of water. And that difference in temperature will cause sound waves coming through the water to distort or refract or reflect, depending what angle they hit it at. So there's like specific geometry based on now you see me, now you don't.
Helm.
But the gist of it is, if you're in the right position, you can be totally invisible to something you can see, or he can see you and you won't have a clue where he is. It's really, like, there's a lot of things you can do with the layer, but it's quite involved. And that's for actual submariners. I'm a simple man. I just like sinky boats, so that's a bit beyond my pay grade. So, at risk of making myself
Master,
obvious to
last
them,
bearing 3, 2, 4.
I'm going to
Make turns for 5 knots.
pick up my speed
Make turns for 10 knots.
to about
Maneuvering
10
on.
knots.
Con sonar lost contact. Master 3, last bearing.
This will
3,
make it more
0,
difficult for me to
3.
hear them.
Contact faded.
And it'll make them more likely to hear me.
Con, dive at 250 feet, dive by.
Okay, interesting. The signatures haven't actually saved. So, if I remember correctly, M1 is a Nox. M2 is also a Nox. So, if I cycle through here, through the various NATO submarines, there we go.
Con sonar.
Nox.
Master 2 is classified as escort.
Got him down to 15,500 yards. He's picking up his speed a little,
Make turns.
Con
so
sonar.
I'm
We
going
are
to
cavitating.
do the same. I'm going to sink deeper so I'm not cavitating.
Depth 350 feet, dive by.
Make
just
turns
slow
for
down.
1.
Con sonar. No longer cavitating.
While I sink.
Con maneuvering. Making turns for 10 knots.
Let's see if this makes us cavitate
Make turns
again.
for 20 knots. Maneuvering eye.
So we will level off here at 351 feet.
Con maneuvering. Making turns for 20 knots.
Pick up to perhaps
Con sonar. We are cavitating.
22, I think we might be safe.
Make turns for
Con sonar. No longer
Yep,
cavitating.
22 knots we can get away with. But we now well and truly can't hear him. We only know that he was heading north at about the speed we're going. I'm going to take the sub a little deeper
Make
so I
depth
can pick up a bit more
400
speed.
feet, dive by.
This thing can actually go faster underwater than most surface naval vessels are able to go. on the surface. Well, I mean, it's certainly faster than most naval vessels can go underwater, unless you mean downwards. But yeah, so we can, if we can get deep enough to not cavitate at flank ahead, we can easily catch up to them, but we will still be that loud that if we're in the wrong spot under the layer, they'll pick us up anyway. Throughout the Cold War, the Soviets generally lagged behind in two major areas. The first being the silent running of their submarines. Soviet propellers were not quite as well made as American props, and it wasn't until they managed to sneakily obtain some of the machinery used to build said propellers off of the Japanese, through a business deal, I believe it was, with one of the major Japanese engineering firms, that they figured out how to do it themselves. And then the Sierra came about, and the Sierra was actually legitimately threatening to the newer NATO subs because it was just as quiet as they were. They also tended not to have very good sonar, and so instead of relying solely on that, as time went on, they began to tack on other sensors like isotope sniffers to tell if a nuclear submarine had been through the water in the area the submarine was in, and roughly how long ago it had passed, and also wake detectors. Soviet submarines were also much more solidly built in terms of construction. Although the quality control was not there, the designs were pretty strong. So pretty much all Soviet submarines were double-hulled. So they had the inner pressure hull and then an outer light hull, which wasn't intended to take pressure. It was just there for hydrodynamic reasons, to make the submarine more streamlined. Try and prevent cavitation, which is when you're forming great big noisy streams of bubbles. And also to allow for systems that should be protected but don't need to be pressurized to have somewhere to sit on the submarine. This also meant that they could place their ballast tanks in more logical positions. So typically, while US submarines had a single large belt of ballast tanks, Soviet subs would have a couple of ballast tanks spaced along the submarine, which is why you can see vents all the way along. This made them more likely to be able to resurface if there was an accident. They also had anywhere between 5 and 9, possibly 10 in some of the larger boats, watertight compartments. I think the November had 9. Most had about 6 or 7. US subs, by comparison, typically only had 3 watertight compartments, and that was it. So the American subs weren't as survivable if they took some kind of damage. On the other hand, they were generally built to a higher standard because, Soviet workmanship was not up to the same level of quality as Soviet design. Hello. Okay, so they're aware I'm here. That is an air-launched torpedo. They come in on rockets and drop into the water behind you.
Con, sonar, torpedo in the water.
So they are
Torpedo
aware
in the
that
water.
I'm here.
Bearing
I'm going to
1,
drop a
2,
noisemaker. I'm going to go flank ahead. I'm going to come up in depth, since there's no use hiding anymore.
0 feet, dive by.
I'm actually going to slow down for a second,
Con,
because
sonar, no longer cavitating.
as soon as I'm slow enough to drop a
Make
torpedo,
turns for 0 knots. Maneuvering eye.
which I am here,
3.
I'm going to
Aye,
plop
sir.
a decoy out my side and then pick my speed back
Make
up.
turns for 4, 2 knots.
Con, sonar, we are cavitating.
Now the fact that that was an air-launched torpedo and not a sub-launched torpedo suggests that they either don't have any subs in the area or they don't see me yet, which is a good thing. Hey, Superintendent. Doing something a little different. And something I'm much worse at than DCS. So even though we're making a hell of a lot of noise right now because I'm at flank speed, the decoy is making more noise and is more appealing to the torpedo. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to slow down to try and get rid of that cavitation. I'm also going to come up
no longer
to
cavitating.
periscope depth and just take a quick peek at what's going on outside.
Con, sonar, regain
Yep.
contact on. Master, 3, bearing, 3.
Alpha,
0,
alright.
4.
What gave it away? Was it the stream title, or was it the fact I was doing 42 knots without breaking a sweat? Okay, we got 2 more torps. This is actually kind of troubling. I'm going to pick my speed back up. Probably sit around 10 knots.
1, 0.
I'm going to...
Maneuvering aye.
As soon as I'm shallow enough... That torpedo is right on me, I think.
Make turns for 4, 2 knots.
Yes, it
Maneuvering
is.
Con, knuckle formed. Passing 100 feet.
Con, sonar, lost contact. Master, 1.
Alright, so we
Three,
aren't
three,
really going to
zero.
have the ability to
Contact
pop up
faded.
with the periscope here. Which I was hoping I'd be able to, just to confirm where these ships are. What I'm going to do instead is go active sonar. Stealth is totally out the window at this point. So we know that M4 was the friendly trawler. So we'll try and avoid firing on him. But at the same time, I can't get a good enough picture of the warships to figure out what's going on up there.
Con, knuckle formed.
Con,
Con, knuckle formed.
Okay, I'm going to slow down again.
Make turns for 3, 7 knots. Make turns for 2, 0 knots.
Come up to periscope
Maneuvering
depth.
aye.
I think I may have foxed those torps for now. Got one that's still homing. So I'll drop my speed.
Make turns for 1, 0 knots.
Get rid of my other
Maneuvering aye.
decoy once I'm slow enough.
Shoot 2
Over here.
Aye, sir.
Con, sonar, regained contact on. Master.
Okay, it's actually coming back towards me.
4, 2 knots. Maneuvering aye.
Passing 100 feet. Con, knuckle formed.
Con, sonar, torpedo in the water. Torpedo in the water.
Oh, they are
Bearing
dropping
2,
torps
9,
fucking
3.
everywhere.
Con, sonar, torpedo in the water. Torpedo in the water. Bearing 1, 8, 1.
The thing is, as long as I pay enough attention to the situation map, I can dodge torpedoes all day. But I'm not going to get a chance to fight back, unfortunately. So I'm going to just go deep here, try and drag this one down with me.
Passing 300 feet.
Oh, I've got water all the way down. Holy shit, this is deep.
Passing 400 feet.
This is the one time I would actually need to be
Passing
careful I don't
500
sink below
feet.
crush depth.
Passing 600 feet.
I can, but by the time I
700
get rid of these torps, my
God,
targets will be
knuckle
well
form.
and truly gone as well.
Con, sonar, no longer cavitating.
Huh. Interesting.
Con, knuckle formed.
Make turns for 2, 0 knots. Maneuvering aye.
Con,
Make turns for 4.
Okay, it's not going to go for that decoy.
Knots. Maneuvering aye.
Con, torpedo room, tube 3 ready.
I've got a conga line of torpedoes on me here.
con, knuckle formed. Con, knuckle formed.
Go down
Depth
1,250 feet.
1,250 feet. Dive
So I guess I will just go deep. Yeah, that's very true.
Con, knuckle formed.
Making turns for 4, 2 knots. Make turns.
But you can see what a hassle these
0 knots.
sub-rocks
Maneuvering
are.
eye.
Basically, the warship has a launcher on it, which has a torpedo dropped by a small cruise missile, and it pretty much Amazon primes a acoustic homing torpedo right on top of your head. So if they don't need to know exactly where you are, they just have to suspect where you are, which they did. And then once I went loud trying to evade the first torpedo, they figured out exactly where I was, and now I'm just getting fucking spammed with gifts from the sky. Like I said, I can get away from them pretty easily. The issue is just that it's taking up precious time while the targets fuck off away from me, and although I do have the speed to catch them, I've got to know where they went first.
Make turns for 4, 2 knots. Maneuvering eye.
Con, knuckle formed.
We'll go deeper. 1750.
1750 feet, dive by.
If I was in an American sub, I would have well and truly been imploded by now. No. Both sides had them. The Soviet ones were slightly different than the Western ones, though. They're a nightmare to fight against, no matter which side's using them.
Passing 1600.
Or 1800. Got a torp incoming
knuckle
there.
formed. Con, knuckle formed. Con, knuckle formed. Con, knuckle formed.
Con,
Passing 1800 feet.
Okay, Fox that one. We got one more torpedo incoming. So I'm going to stay at this depth and just belt my way west-ish, sort of northwest, which is the last known position of those
Come
ships.
right to 310.
I'm going to turn my own sonar off, which I forgot that I had running, because I'm a genius.
Helm, steady course.
This is a mixture. The playable Soviet subs are now official, but I've got a mod which adds extra ones. There's also Chinese subs and surface ships. They added a South China Sea map as well. It's not a very new update, it was like a year or two ago, I think. It's been that long since I played the game that I didn't realise. So I had to update some mods and try a few things out. Now, this kind of trapezium-shaped thing here, where the windscreen sits for when the captain's up top, this little shape is actually the escape pod. So on most modern Soviet and Russian submarines, you'll see this shape, and what it is it's the escape vehicle. So the crew will just all pile into that thing and it'll shoot off if the sub sinks, and it's too deep to, just leave it in their rescue suits. The Typhoons, which are the real big boy submarines, the big old nuke boats, they have two of those, one on each side of the conning tower. Yes it does. There's also, from the mods, they've added classes of submarine that aren't present in the game, including from other countries. The only problem is that you can't edit the models. You can edit textures, but not models. You can edit the placement of parts of models though somehow. And so people have kind of hacked them together IL-246 Frankenplane style by taking like the bow of one submarine, sticking it to the hull of another sub, and then the conning tower of two different subs smushed together. And it makes them kind of sort of look like what they're supposed to be. Some look closer than others, but you know, they're not 100% accurate. The mod ones, the official ones, are pretty good. So there's a couple of torps just circling around over there, it looks like. I'm going to slow right down.
Turns for 5.
Rig ship for ultra quiet.
I'm going to surface,
3, 5,
and I'm going to see what I can see. Well, Max, the biggest difference between World War II and Cold War subs is that World War II subs were designed to sink merchant shipping and surface naval vessels. I believe there is only a single recorded instance where a submarine sank another submarine while submerged during World War II, and it was right at the end of the war. A Royal Navy sub sank a German U-boat. There were no guided torpedoes. You had to set all of their heading and speed and everything manually before you fired them, and once they were out of the tube, you couldn't do anything about them. So pretty much it was doing things the old-fashioned way. You had to aim them very carefully, fire them very carefully, time things perfectly, all of that. About sort of the mid-Cold War period, you had wake homing torpedoes, you had acoustic homing torpedoes, you had decoy torpedoes, which are these little black things here. They just make a hell of a lot of noise and pretend they're a submarine.
Making turns for 5 knots.
You have wire guidance on the torpedoes, so you can actually switch around their parameters after they're out of the tube, as long as the wire doesn't break. The submarines themselves were much larger and more capable, much faster. They were able to stay submerged much longer. Like a nuclear submarine can stay submerged basically as long as it has supplies for food. It does not need to surface for months on end if need be. Whereas a World War II diesel electric sub had to surface typically every 2 or 3 days, if not more often, to charge its batteries and to get some fresh air on board. They also had much more primitive sensors. Typically they didn't have active sonar, they only had passive hydrophones. And you can forget about things like wake sensors, and obviously there was no isotope sniffers because they weren't, you know, fighting nuclear subs. Yeah, they did have acoustic torpedoes, but they were really shitty. Like, not the kind of torpedoes where you could effectively engage another submarine like
regained
this.
contact on Master 1, bearing 330.
A lot of tech that people think came about during the 60s and 70s actually existed at the end of World War II. It just didn't see much use, or it was so primitive it wasn't really worth using yet.
Con sonar regained contact on Master
Okay, that's
4,
interesting.
bearing 322.
We can hear these guys again. So once I'm shallow enough, which I will be shortly... What the fuck was that? Are they depth charging? I think they must be. Electric power, it's a mix. Some torpedoes are electric powered, some are powered by monopropellants, some are powered by oxidizers mixed with something else. And those are particularly prone to fires or explosions. There's also things like the Shkval, which is a 70s design from the Soviets, which is super cavitating. So what that means is it's a rocket-powered torpedo, and it has a special nose design that forms a gas bubble around the torpedo. So the actual torpedo isn't touching the water. The only thing that is touching the torpedo is this gas bubble around it. So basically you take away all the surface friction from the torpedo and transfer it to its gas bubble. So instead of a torpedo that goes, say, like 50, 60, 70 knots, you suddenly have a torpedo that goes 200 knots or 300 knots, which is just stupid fast. There's no way a ship can get away from that. And those were originally intended for engaging things like carrier groups, and they were intended to be nuclear tipped. But I think they eventually also made conventional ones. So I'm going to put up my periscope and my ESM. The detection threshold's pretty high. Well, it's all the way up, so I reckon they probably know I'm here. What the ESM does is it picks up their radar and tells me how strong it is. If I put my own radar up, they will immediately triangulate it, so I'm not going to do that, especially if I can physically see them. Actually, you know what? Interesting. This Nox is not moving. Okay, that's our trawler. This guy's really close. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give him a wake homer.
Con, dive at 358, dive by.
And hopefully that will track him. And that's the Belknap. So if I go to signature, that's not where I want to go. I want to go Belknap. That's what he is.
Sonar, Master 3 is classified as escort.
And then the... Interesting, the other Nox is... Is that a smoke screen he's laying? Or did he just launch another ASROC at me? I can't tell. Oh, it was an ASROC. Oh god.
Bearing 111.
Pull the masts in and fucking dive.
Con, sonar, torpedo in the water. Torpedo in the water. Bearing 142.
Yeah, so they picked me up from my masts.
Passing 100 feet.
But I did get a wake homer off at that ship, and now I know pretty confidently where two of them are.
Passing 300 feet.
Con, sonar, lost contact.
Passing 400 feet.
That's quite a
Passing
few
500 feet.
torpedoes incoming. Yeah, the Long Lance was an oxygen
Passing
torpedo,
600 feet.
and it was renowned for causing the ship that carried it to explode catastrophically if said ship took a hit right where it stored its torpedoes. They were very good torps, but they were also incredibly dangerous to actually
Sonar,
carry.
no longer cavitating.
Passing 900 feet.
Okay, so about 900 feet is where we
1,000
stop cavitating at flank. Interesting. I'm gonna go ahead and reload that wake homer. We can't see where our 5365 went anymore, but I'm going to assume it's on target. Yeah, I'm pretty sure an exploding torpedo is what happened to the Kursk. I think that's what they figured it was. Because it was an explosion in the forward torpedo room. And, it was a pretty violent explosion at that. The interesting thing is, with the Kursk, that was probably the only major Russian submarine accident where the thing was just, like, really in a bad way from the start. A lot of Soviet submarines that sank during the Cold War actually surfaced and then sank again. In fact, I think all of them that ended up sinking were able to surface at least briefly before sinking again. Whereas the nuclear submarines that the Americans lost just sank straight to the bottom. In the case of Thresher, and probably in the case of Scorpion, they figured out why. It was because the blow valves for the ballast tanks iced up, I believe it was.
Torpedo in the water. Torpedo in the water.
And so they couldn't blow their ballast, and they just sank to their crush depth. It was really kind of ironic because the Americans had placed an admiral in charge of naval architecture for nuclear submarines who was absolutely over-the-top paranoid about nuclear safety as far as reactors went. Like, the Americans had, and still have, I believe, so many restrictions on what they can and can't do with nuclear boats, purely based off of this guy. So, although they might have really fancy high-tech submarines, they can't exploit their full potential because they have such stringent safety regulations and all these, you know, like I believe to actually command a US nuclear sub, you have to be qualified as a nuclear engineer or nuclear physicist or something like that.
8-3.
Which is not really necessary, but that's just what this guy, it was Hyman Rickover, that's what he thought was necessary to make things safe. And yet the super over-the-top safety regime did not help when the Americans lost 2 nuclear submarines in quick succession to something totally unrelated to the actual power plant. But from what I've read, that's still in effect to this day. Like, American submarine crews are still kind of bamboozled when they do training exercises with Royal Navy nuke crews because the Royal Navy submariners are absolute batshit and have no regard for nuclear safety. Well, not in the sense that they do anything dangerous, but in the sense that they don't treat the boat with kid gloves like the Americans do. I could be talking out of my ass, I have no naval experience, but that is what I have found in reading both accounts from people that are in the Navy and, you know, sort of second and third hand stories. But it's really interesting looking at the difference in priorities and the difference in design. Particularly when you look at, like, a lot of Soviet equipment is very basic, rugged, designed to be simple so conscripts can operate. Like, look at the MiG-21 that I'm usually flying in DCS. That thing is so simple and rugged. It's not high-tech. It's not perhaps as capable as the things it was fighting. Oh, look, there's a Nox up there. We're going to fire a torp up that way and just see if we can catch his wake.
Aye, sir.
We got rid of one of those. Wow, I was actually able to fire that at flank speed without stuffing the tube. Interesting. So, yeah, it's like one situation where that was totally reversed was submarines. The Soviets had so much high-tech shit crammed into their submarines from about the mid-70s onwards. The Americans had quieter subs and they had better sonar, but in most other regards, the Soviets had technological superiority. The other area the Americans had superiority was like information systems. The Soviets had better automation. They had better passive sensors. They had much better streamlining and propulsion, other than the whole noise issue. And they also had much more survivable submarines.
Master 2, bearing 060. Con sonar.
And also, while the American submarines
bearing 0.
were being designed under the iron fist of this admiral who thought that, you know, every submarine should be suited to his stringent specifications on what made it safe and what made a good submarine design. The Soviets had a whole series of different design bureaus, each with a specialization. And they would compete with each other, basically. So, ironically, the Soviets had something that better resembled a free market environment than the Americans did when it came to, like, submarine naval architecture. Which is actually kind of common for the Soviets, because they had a centrally planned, military-centric economy. They could throw stupid amounts of resources behind the most esoteric shit, whereas the Americans wouldn't risk it. And yeah, it broke them in the end, and it often resulted in designs that didn't work very well, or, you know, weren't quite perfected, or just weren't useful. But it gave them a lot of really impressive tech, and it makes me really sad that they were never able to just get over each other. Because if you had some kind of combined Soviet and American design bureau in literally any field, space, aviation, naval architecture, anything, you would end up with the most incredible shit just from the two totally different approaches that they took fused together.
Con sonar lost contact. Master 3, last bearing.
Okay, so we got one of the Noxes. We are apparently right under the Belknap, or at least right under where we think he is. I'm going to slow the sub down so I can actually hear him, perhaps.
0 knots. Maneuvering aye.
That's the vague outline of the Nox sinking over there. Down she goes. Long way to the bottom here. We're getting pinged off to one side, so I think the Belknap's actually moved down down behind us here, which is why we can't hear him. So I'm going to turn the sub around, so he's not in our baffles anymore. Yeah, there's no need for rear tubes anymore, precisely because you can just tell the torpedo to turn around once it's clear of the sub.
10 knots.
It also gives you more space inside for actual essential machinery, rather than big clunky torpedo tubes.
Contact on.
There we go.
3,
There's the Belknap.
6, 2.
So we should pick him up better once we turn more towards him. He's still kind of in the baffles, and he's also on the wrong side of the layer to us. Oh, are they actually working on the J8 too? Excellent! I was hoping for that. For a long time, I never really found much interesting about Chinese aircraft, but kind of as I looked into it more and realized, like, look at all these wonderful, weird mishmashes they've got. The J8-2 is the nose of a MiG-23, the wings and stabilizers of a MiG-21, the rear fuselage of a MiG-19, and the radar and avionics of an American aircraft. It's just a mindfuck. It's incredible. Okay, so we got a little bit of a better signature. I'm going to come up. I'm going to slow down as well.
6, 5.
Rig shift for ultra quiet.
Con sonar, switching to active search.
Didn't mean to do that, but it's fine. But yeah, the Soviets put a hell of a lot of money and energy into subs, like a hell of a lot. And they came out with some incredible technology. Whereas the Americans stuck with, they'd pick a good design and they'd stick with it. And even if you look at the different classes of US sub, each one's an incremental improvement on the last. So it's a very American approach to find something that's safe and just, excuse me, just gradually improve on it. Whereas the Soviets were very much, we'll throw, because, you know, they didn't really have money per se. Money is irrelevant in a centrally planned economy. They would throw their man hours behind these totally out of left field novel ideas, which they didn't know whether it was going to work or not, but they figured, you know, fuck it, we got the resources, why not try it? And so sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't. And in the case of the Alpha, it worked really well for the job it was intended to do, but it was not economically viable. And at the end of the day, even if you're a centrally planned economy, economic viability is kind of an issue. Oh shit, I'm right onto this guy.
5. Contact faded.
He's just starting to move. He probably heard me. So what I'm gonna do, since he's gonna move that way, I'm just gonna yeet.
Aye, sir.
Send one of those up to the surface, and that should hopefully cross his wake and start homing on it. Yeah. Although the funny thing is, the really big boy, the Typhoon in Western speak, or the Akula in Soviet speak,
contact on. Master 3, bearing 0. 3.
That thing had 5 pressure hulls. It was fucking enormous. It was the size of like a decent sized surface vessel. And yet it only carried, I believe it was 8 missiles? 12 missiles, something like that. It was not very many, and they weren't very big missiles either. And it was this tremendous submarine, like absolutely enormous submarine. If you look on Imager or on Reddit probably, in like military porn or something, somebody posted an entire album of photos they took during a walkthrough tour of one of the surviving Typhoons, one of the ones that's mothballed. And it's just crazy how much space is in those things, how huge they are, and yet how little they carry in the way of weaponry. They're genuinely impressive boats, but they're also kind of impressive in just how lightly armed they are for something of that size and that cost, because boy were they expensive. Like, you get to a point where even if you do have a centrally planned economy, it's just not a good idea to keep pursuing something, and that's where this thing, the 705, the Alpha, ran into problems, and that's also where the Typhoon ran into problems. The Soviets just did not have the resources to produce as many as they wanted. And in the case of the Alphas as well, because they were so high maintenance due to the liquid metal reactor, they just couldn't sustain them. They lost, I believe, I think it was like 2 or 3 of them to just not being able to prevent the coolant from freezing and fucking up the reactor compartments while they were in port, once the heating machinery broke down in the port, and the rest were just, you know, they ran out their service lives pretty quickly, and they were retired very, very quickly for what they were. Incredibly capable submarines, but just not viable. Likewise, the K222, which was, I believe, the Papa class by NATO standards, that thing was even more capable than this. That could dive to, like, over a kilometer, I believe. And it was even faster. That thing was like a 45-knot submarine, no sweat. And it carried cruise missiles. But they only built one of them, because it was all they could really afford. Can I use the Shkval? I don't believe it's in-game. I've never seen it. I could have brought USET 80s, but I went with the Set 65s instead, just for the slightly lower tech approach.
Con sonar, noisemaker, bearing.
I might actually have to
4,
see
6.
if I can find a mod that adds the Shkval instead, because, man, if I had the Shkval, this engagement would have been over within like 5 minutes of starting. I wouldn't have had to dodge all these torpedoes, because they wouldn't have even known I was there. I would have just launched them from way far out and killed them instantly. Those things are ridiculous. And to think, like, the Germans had a working prototype in the late 90s, early noughties, and abandoned it because they couldn't really justify the cost. The Americans still don't have a working comparable system that's been accepted into service. And the Shkval is fucking 1970s technology. It's unreal.
Torpedo room 2-2 ready.
Like, it's like the Jehemics in the
Con sonar, we are
Hornet.
captivating.
The Soviets have had that tech since 1981-82, and the US has only just got a working version in their own fighters. I mean, partly it's due to development priorities. The Americans just didn't see the point until now, I guess.
700 feet.
But it really shows you how the Cold War wasn't just a case of, oh, well, the Soviets have crap tech and make up for it with numbers. It was asymmetrical balance. The Soviets had different priorities, they knew what their limitations were, so they worked within those limitations. Likewise, the Americans knew what their strengths were, so they worked within those strengths. The two different mindsets make it really interesting to kind of wargame the two sides against each other and figure out how things would have panned out. Because I think in a lot of situations it would have ended up a lot more even than people suspect, just because of the offsetting strengths and weaknesses.
Torpedo room 2-5 ready.
So, I have no idea where those 5365s went, but judging by the fact that Belknap is dropping noisemakers, I'm gonna guess that at least one of them is tracking him. Meanwhile, I'm more or less blind to what's going on around me. I'm gonna sink a little deeper.
Make depth 1000 feet, dive high.
There he goes. And he just dumped another noisemaker there.
God, knuckle formed.
What's this? Is this one of mine? No, that's one of his, I think. See him maneuvering there. He's really trying to get away from something.
Con maneuvering, making turns forward.
Uh-oh. Uh-oh.
Knots.
Oh, you're done, boy. You are done, my boy.
Con sonar,
Here.
lost contact. Master 3, last bearing 3, 5.
That was pretty
6.
fucking spectacular.
Contact breaking up.
Right in the middle, too. That would have fucking cracked his keel, although that's not simulated in this game. Very sadly. I would love to watch him split in half, but it's not happening.
At 1000 feet, dive high.
Now, we did have that other Nox, who fucked off way up to the north early in the engagement and has been basically a non-factor in it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just continue in his general direction, excuse me,
Helm I.
at flank speed and about 1,000 feet, just to try and catch him up. And then once I get closer to where I think he might be, I'll do the same thing. I'll surface, quickly pop my periscope, my ESM, and see if I can spot him that way. This is like the absolute Papega method of dealing with surface vessels, by the way. I am definitely not good at this game. I am not well versed in submarine warfare. I know more about the equipment itself than how to use it, which is true of most things, actually. I'm also much more knowledgeable about Soviet aircraft and how to effectively use them, as you may have noticed watching my DCS streams. But I do find submarine warfare very interesting, and particularly the submarines themselves. There goes the bell nap. The kind of weird shadow effect that you can see through the fog isn't part of the base game. That's just because I use the NVIDIA control panel to force ambient occlusion, which I don't think the game has by default. Oh, and he just vanished. Spooky. How deep the bottom is here. It's more than 3,000 feet. And it's deeper than the camera will pan, in fact, I'm pretty sure. Must be over a trench. The area I'm in is off the northern coast of Norway, so yeah, the water there is going to be pretty deep, I guess. If I can just remember how to open the situation map. F10 is my HUD. F3 is torpedo view. F4 is... oh, sorry, F5 is that. F6... F7... Don't mind me as I just casually press buttons until I figure it out. No. Okay. Is it M or T or something? I don't remember. Probably be a good idea to actually memorize the most important fucking keybind, wouldn't it? Oh, here we go, tactical map. Tab. I'm a fucking genius. Should have been like the first button I pressed. Okay. So we are in pretty deep water. The area we're in is just... there's actually no land within the battle area, but there will be to the south, because I placed myself just off the coast. But we are over some seriously deep shit right here. Okay, I'm going to
Make depth 3.
head back up to the surface.
Make
I'm gonna slow myself
turns
down.
for 10 knots. Maneuvering I.
So, one of the interesting design features of the Alpha, because it is so small, and I mean this is small, this is a tiny boy. Because it is so small, it has a very small crew, about 30 men, and I believe they were all warrant officers or officers on the Alphas. If you look at the damage control, so starting from just before the rear end of the conning tower, right about here, from that backwards is a sealed compartment that the crew typically do not access. Usually the only reason anyone would go into that part of the boat is during maintenance in port. The crew work and live in this area here,
Sonar regained contact.
Maneuvering.
and
Making
most of the
turns
boat
for
systems are
1,
automated.
0
The only reason they were
knots.
able to build this thing so small and with such a small crew is because it's a highly automated boat.
3, 1, 2.
Typically, like for an American attack sub, you would have a crew of about 160. For a more modern
sonar,
Soviet
we are
attack sub,
capitating.
like the later Victors or the Sierra or the Akula,
Make turns.
or in their
Con sonar,
naming
no
system,
longer
the
cavitating.
Shuka, the Pike, you have a crew of about 100. So you've got about 66% of the crew that you would have on a comparable American submarine of the same size. And then this thing is just so much smaller, it has even less. So this guy, we know that he is a Nox.
Upscope.
We're just going to pop the scope up.
Raise the ESM mast.
We're well within his detection, so we can't stay on the surface very long at all. We have just enough time
Non-maneuvering, making turns for
to
5
designate him as a
knots.
Nox. Figure out where he's going. Somehow, I don't have a very good firing solution on him. So we're going to pull our
Lower
mast
ESM
down.
mast.
Make depth 150 feet, dive by.
He's heading generally south towards us, I think. So we're going to get below the layer.
Make depth 350 feet, dive by.
And try and get a little bit away from where we are. Dogleg out
Come
this
right
side,
to
maybe.
062 helm I.
We will also hook off a decoy torp in that direction,
Aye, sir.
just to try and bamboozle him further. Yeah, the combination of small cross-section and a very powerful power plant, a very light power plant as well, help make it a speedy boy. Streamlining helps it as well. So the interesting thing is, right from the start, the Soviet reactors were smaller and lighter and more powerful than their American equivalents,
Master 4.
but they were
last
also
bearing,
noisier.
3-1-1. Contact faded.
So typically speaking, the Soviet boats are faster than the American ones, but they're also easier to detect. Right up until you get to about the Sierra, where they started figuring out how to noise-proof them a little better. And that was, like, quite late in the deal.
Con, torpedo room, tube 3 ready.
Okay. I reckon he is still coming roughly towards me. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to be a cheeky boy. And I'm going to do one of these.
Shoot 2-1. Aye, sir.
Now, it already broke the... actually, no, sorry, these don't have wires on them, I don't think. The Set 65s. So that should go up towards the surface and start tracking, and it should pick him up because he's barreling straight towards us and he's making a hell of a lot of noise. And that will force him to either evade it, or it will kill him. And if it forces him to evade, then we can maneuver into a better position to fire a wake homer at him, and then that's pretty much guaranteed to kill him. Are there Soviet subs with towed array? Yes, there are. So, if I go back to the menu once I'm done here and show you the available Soviet subs, you'll notice that some of them have the big teardrop-shaped bulb on top of the tail fin there. That's the towed array.
Dive at 350 feet, dive by.
Sadly, no, this is not PvP. I really wish this game had a multiplayer mode. I guess there's a possibility, a vague possibility in the future it may come, but for now the priority has been single player. So, no multiplayer yet, but it would be a lot of fun, I think. A hell of a lot of fun. Well, I don't think he's sent any ASROCs my way yet, so that's a plus. I may have run him out of ASROCs at this point, considering how many I managed to dodge early in the piece. Our little Soviet trawler friend is well out of the equation, so he should be safe now no matter what I send towards this Nox. Even if they fail to acquire him and start heading out to the fucking boonies, the trawler should be okay. excuse me. I've played Silent Hunter 3. I think I have Silent Hunter 4. I can't remember, but I haven't played it. And I played Silent Hunter 3 quite intensely for a period of about a month or two, and then moved on to other stuff, and when I came back to play it again, something had broken my game. So I'm going to have to reinstall that one and see if I can get Grey Wolves working again. And then start a new campaign, which I actually could probably stream, which would be nice. I really like the Type 2 U-boat in Silent Hunter, actually. I held onto it long after I could have got a Type 7, just because I liked having a cute little coastal boat that I could sneak into places that I couldn't get a Type 7. It made my little Scapper Flow escapade much easier, put it that way. Trying to get that thing... Trying to get that thing through a Churchill barricade at night was probably one of the most nerve-wracking experiences I've had in a game. Without using external views as well. It was no external views. Yeah, it would be kind of strange. Although, actually, you know what? I think it would probably work better as a stream than a video. Because the thing is, when you're streaming, because you can just talk to people. Like, how many streams are there where people just sit there for 3 or 4 hours chatting to their audience? Basically, Silent Hunter 3 would be that. You could run it real time, do a real-time campaign, and just talk to people and, like, spurg out about World War II naval history. I think it's more suited to streaming than a lot of games, to be honest, just because of that. Like, I know guys that used to run Silent Hunter 3 playthroughs in real time while they were at work, and they just tab in and out and run it real time there.
Con sonar, torpedo in the water.
Oh fuck.
Torpedo in the water.
Okay.
Bearing 3,
He's
0,
woken
0.
up.
Con sonar, we are cavitating.
We're going deep, boys. Let's actually take this thing down to 2,000 feet.
Make depth 2.
Let's
0,
make this
0,
interesting.
0 feet, dive by.
God, knuckle formed.
Yeah, you could edit it to make it
Con
better for
sonar,
YouTube,
noise
but
maker, bearing
honestly,
3,
I do
3,
think it would be a
0.
good
Con
streaming
sonar,
game,
no longer cavitating.
just because it suits the format. Whereas with
Con
YouTube,
sonar,
yeah, you
lost
can edit it
contact.
down,
Master 1,
but
last bearing 3, 2, 9.
it's
Contact
a
faded.
different format. Like, you can't interact with your audience as much on YouTube. Okay, I think that's homing in on Noisemaker. Not sure what my torps are doing. That's his, I think. That's the sub-rock. This is one of mine. That will be the Set 65 I fired.
Con
And he
sonar,
has dropped
noisemaker
noisemakers to
bearing
try and
3,
get
2,
away from
2.
it. So I reckon if I put a 5365 about
torpedo room, 2 James
jammed,
on launch.
of course, I'm going too fast.
Make turns for. Make turns for 10 knots. Maneuvering aye.
Once I slow down enough to not fuck up my torp tubes,
Con sonar regained contact on master 1 bearing 316.
he's booking it out of there. Okay, well, that's okay, because I am going to
Con,
put
dive at 2, 0,
this
0, 0.
over there,
Aye, sir.
and then speed this boy
Make
up.
turns for 2 knots.
We'll just
Maneuvering
pretty
aye.
much stern chase him. We're deep enough to do so at high
Con
speed
sonar,
without
noisemaker
cavitating.
bearing 312.
Con, helm, steady course.
I was actually, see, I haven't played Silent Hunter 5, but a friend of mine who was quite into Silent Hunter was of the opinion that it was a big disappointment, which is a shame because I was really looking forwards to it after they showcased the actual walking through the submarine thing and interacting with the crew. There was a there was a game coming out, which is kind of like a crew management game coupled with Silent Hunter, but I'm not sure how realistic it's going to be. That's the only thing, and I can't remember the name of it right now. It's
Con, torpedo room, tube 1 ready.
It's German based, so you're in U-boats. But yeah, it looks really interesting from the trailer, but I'm just hoping that it's realistic enough to tickle that itch without being a broken mess. Because I'm totally down for crew management. Like, I really like that kind of immersive stuff. Fuck, if you put me in a game where I can just walk around inside a submarine or a ship or something, I'm happy. The entire appeal of fucking Star Citizen to me was that one of my friends can whale out and buy a frigate or something, and I can just walk around in his ship while he flies it, and then if I feel like, I can just jump in my fighter and go and kill something. Like, that kind of stuff really appeals to me. So, something that takes the sort of walk through the sub-crew management side of things, but also couples it with the more in-depth realism of Silent Hunter 3 with Grey Wolves mod, would really be like the be-all, end-all of sub-games for me. But I'd also like a more modern version, so I can, you know, do the same thing with this little puppy right here. Yeah, that's very true. I have heard, like, I do know a couple of people that played Silent Hunter 4 with that mod, and I did hear it was pretty neat, but, I haven't really looked into it myself yet, to be honest. Okay, so that knocks us double back. So, unfortunately, I'm out of wake homers here.
Con, torpedo room, 2-2 ready.
And I've got no way of telling that one to turn because it's not wire guided, or not wire connected. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to blast one of these over here and hope it acquires. Should have enough distance between us for it to head up to the surface. One of the things I did in Silent Hunter, and I also did in IL-246 for a campaign I did in that, and this is going to be, like, tremendously fucking nerdy, but just hear me out. I started, like, keeping fucking logs, basically. So I had, like, logs of what was going on and shit like that, and what was happening with, you know, to what extent the game simulated what was happening with the crew, like, if anyone fucking got sick or died or whatever. And it was really fucking depressing. Especially the IL-2 campaign, because it was the 1944 Ukraine campaign, so like covering Operation Bagration and the following offensives from that. And holy fuck, that was depressing, because we had so many successful missions, and we were like just about to Berlin, like in the closing week or two of the war. And we lost our squadron leader, who was like a twice hero of the Soviet Union, to the most stupid thing. Like, I think a stray bullet caught him. I don't remember where I put the actual file where I was writing all this stuff. I might have lost it in a hard drive crash. But, like, he died to the dumbest shit right at the end of the war. And it was like, damn, dude, this shit actually happened to people. Like, they would make it through the whole war, and just something would come out of the blue. Kind of makes you think. It was like when I was playing Red Orchestra, I was in a realism unit for a while, and I looked through the actual records of that unit on the Eastern Front, and they had some guys that survived right through every campaign that unit fought in from 1939 until, like, late April 1945, and then just got killed. War is shit, dude. Fucking shit. Some random fucking bullet does not care how good of a soldier you are, doesn't care how much shit you've survived, doesn't care if you've got a family.
Con sonar, noisemaker, bearing.
Okay, that one's acquired.
0.
No, hasn't acquired. Okay, interesting. This is a lot more drawn out of an engagement than I expected or planned for it to be. Like, I thought this would probably be a 20-30 minute engagement. How long have I been going now? Like, at least an hour? Probably more?
Con sonar, noisemaker, bearing 185.
Which says more about my level of incompetence in submarines than anything, I suppose. So, he's still dropping noisemakers, and I'm being pinged from a torpedo somewhere, an active torpedo, probably one of his. So what I think's happened here is he's dropped an ASROC over here, which I haven't seen, and he's doubled back on it. So I gotta watch he doesn't bait me into it. Ah, yeah, that happened a lot. That was why the Tempest got invasion stripes right from the get-go. The Typhoon had the same issue. Typhoons had yellow ID stripes painted on their wings and their tail. Well, I've been sitting here yapping, my tea's been going cold. Okay, I might try blasting a torpedo on passive at him, maybe. And I'll lead him slightly. So we'll tell it to head about that way.
Torpedo room, tube jammed on launch.
Didn't reduce my speed first.
0.
Absolute Papega
Maneuvering
mode.
aye.
There we go.
Shoot 2-2. Aye, sir.
The American subs are even worse for that because they have tubes further back. So
Make turns
this thing has like
4,
the
2,
sonar's in the
9.
chin,
Maneuvering
and the
aye.
tubes are right over it. So the tubes are just firing directly ahead. The American subs have a full spherical sonar that takes up the entire nose of the sub. And so your tubes are back here in the second compartment behind it, and angled outwards, so they're even less tolerant of high-speed launches. I'm actually going to reduce my depth as well, so I'm going to come up to about 300 feet.
Make depth 350 feet. Dive high.
And I'm going to slow right the fuck down. I'm actually going to go to silent running. Which is going to pause my reloads, now I think about it. One of the mods I've got also changes torpedo reload time. Makes it a little bit more realistic.
Con, torpedo room, tube.
Rig ship for ultra quiet.
So we got 2 tubes loaded with actual dangerous torpedoes and 1 with a decoy. That's my last decoy. So I'm going to hold on to that for now. We can actually see this guy, so we got a really strong solution on him, probably because he's trying to belt it away from those torpedoes we shot. This is one of my torps, I believe. And it's just crossed behind his wake, so I don't think that's going to pick him up.
Maneuvering, making turns for 5 knots.
It might do, but I don't think it will. Oh, it did make a slightly lazier turn there. It might have a suspicion he's there. Yeah, it's not particularly realistic, but for people like me who are just not smart enough to be able to evade torpedoes from a 2D tactical map, it does make the game a little more playable. But I totally understand, like, any issues with that. Like, it feels kind of cheaty, I just do it because that's the only way I can really effectively play the game. But yeah, you are, especially in these older subs before they had all these fancy computers, you are essentially trying to do things by a flat map. And just maths in your head. Okay. Put this one
Con sonar, noise
out
making,
here.
bearing, 1, 2, 1.
And then we'll fire this one active on the same course.
Aye, sir.
Reload those three, will come
Green
off.
shift for ultra
Oh,
quiet.
no, okay. We're off ultra quiet. Can I pick up my speed a little
Make turns for 6
without
knots,
revealing
maneuvering
myself?
aye.
Okay, I'm gonna come in
Come
towards
left
his
to
course here.
104. Helm aye.
Con sonar, noisemaker, bearing, 1, 1, 6.
I'm almost tempted just to fucking sprint up to him and top him with 3 torpedoes at once. Use my raw speed to try and get under his weapons, but it's kinda risky. Does look like he's doubling back on me. I might be able to get away with this. I think I will. So as soon as this torp's ready, I'm gonna...
On, fire control. Unable to fire.
It's not ready yet. It's not loaded. Oh, he's doubling back there.
Con, torpedo room.
I think
2,
those
1
will
ready.
find him. We'll
Con,
put this on
helm,
active.
Steady course.
We'll fire it this way,
2-1. Aye, sir.
and sooner or later he should cross the path of it if the other two don't get him first. But I'm just going to continue on in his general direction for now, and we'll see what these torps are up to. So these two are basically right next to each other. There he is, that kind of shadow right there. They might be too deep still to pick him up, that's the issue. And I did fire those from quite far down. One of them's passive, one's active, or will go active once it reaches its waypoint. So if anything, the active one might find him, but I don't expect the passive one will. It looks like it's just too deep to pick him up. We'll see what they do. I'm actually going to
Make
bring my
depth
depth
3,
down
5,
to
dive aye.
about 100. Going to fire another active torp this way.
2-2. Aye, sir.
We've still got plenty left, and this is the only remaining enemy, so I can just chuck torps all day. Doesn't matter to me. It's not a very efficient way of killing him, but it will kill him, eventually. Looks like he's got away from those two. He's gonna have to try and turn inside that one, which will bring him directly head-on with me, which actually plays pretty well into my hands. But I think this one should probably pop him. How many torps does it carry? A lot. I've still got a bunch of spares, well, 3 spares left once I load these tubes. I think I carry something like 24 torps total.
Con, torpedo room. Tube 1 ready.
That one is already active, and it can see him. So he's going to start juking it and dropping noisemakers, which will delay the inevitable. But I'd say that one should probably get him. And just to make sure, I'm going to cut his
Come
turn
left to 047. Helm
and
aye.
try and put myself on a course where I can intercept him myself. But it looks like this torp's on him. He may well be out of countermeasures by now. So let's watch the fireworks.
Con sonar, regained contact on. Master, 4, bearing.
We just picked
3,
up the fishing
0,
trawler
2.
again. He's way out there, so he's safe. Oh, this guy's done. That torp is right up his ass.
Dive at 100 feet, dive aye.
Boom!
Con, torpedo room. 2-2 ready.
Mission accomplished. So it seems that neither of the possible skipjacks actually spawned in, or if they did, they just immediately left the combat area. At no point have I encountered anything that could be a possible enemy submarine. It was just a friendly fishing trawler and
Con,
2 Noxes and a
changing
Belknap.
course.
Now lying in the depths, probably about 5 or 10 kilometers down. Pretty neat oil slick effect, and down this boy goes.
Con, torpedo room, tube 3 ready.
Kind of a pity that bits don't fall off as he's sinking, and that you can't crack keels and cause ships to split in half, but still, it's pretty cool watching them slip under the waves. That is the end of him, and so we can just head out of the combat area and back to base, because that is what these submarines would
Come
do.
right to 0, 6,
Once they've
5,
accomplished their mission
LI.
and destroyed their targets, they would be headed straight back to port, because they are underwater interceptors. Basically, this thing is the underwater equivalent of the MiG-25. So you can go right ahead, and there's weapons nearby, but no enemy ships. Leave combat. So we had 6 Set 65s left and 1 MG-74. The MG-74 is our decoy. We sank 2 Noxes and a Belknap, and the only damage that our own sub took was 2 tubes due to my own stupidity. But that went pretty well. So if I go back to the main menu, there's like an in-game encyclopedia, much like DCS has, and I can show you some of the Soviet submarines in that unit reference. Here we go. So, you know, you've got your American subs, Los Angeles, 688I, Narwhal, Narwhal 2, and this, some of the mods I have do have theoretical designs, which are always noted as such. So here you go, this is a theoretical design based on the Narwhal. 68 permit, the permit refit with the towed array. Seawolf, so this is a modern sub. This is like quite new. Early skipjack, late skipjack, so on and so forth. And then some of these, like for instance, this is, you might recognize the general layout of this. This is somebody's taken the Kilo model and then just stuck bits on it, because you can't edit the models themselves. You just have to like copy paste bits together and Franken sub them. It's like the old days of modding IL-2 1946, where people didn't make custom models for aircraft yet, so you had to Frankenplane and just mishmash bits together. It's like a kit bash, basically. But if we go to Soviet subs, so you can see the Akula, or the Shuka, has a towed array sitting on top of it. Then towed array. The Alpha doesn't have one. This is the theoretical improved Alpha. Then you got your Mike class. Which I think was one of their one-offs. November, which was the first Soviet nuclear submarine. And then a theoretical November 2. Kind of surprised that they didn't also include the Project 645, which was a November fitted with a liquid metal reactor like the Alpha had. It was a test bed which is why they did that, but it'd be interesting to have in game. So this is a Sierra. This is the one of the most modern submarines that was in service during Soviet times. And like I said, you can kind of see the outline of the escape pod there on the top of the conning tower. And you can also see the vent holes along the entire length of the sub, because Soviet subs being double-hulled, they could distribute their ballast tanks much more evenly, which made for safer and better handling as far as diving and surfacing went. Victor 1, so you don't have a towed array on the old Victors. You have Victor 2, which is a bit longer, and then the Victor 3 does have a towed array. You got your diesel electric boats. This is a kit bash mod. This is a theoretical design. It's the Lada, which I think is just using the Kilo model, but slightly adjusted. So you can retexture submarines. Like, the texture files are easy to edit, but the models themselves can't be. I don't know why. It's some kind of hard-coded limitation or other. The game runs on Unity, I'm pretty sure. And that's not something you usually have to deal with in Unity games, as far as I'm aware, so I don't know why that's the case. Then some of the older boats, old diesel electrics. Very old diesel electrics. This is essentially World War II technology right here. Just missing its deck guns, and with a chin-mounted sonar bolted on. This is, again, a kit bash. This is the Boré, which is their brand new boomer. Delta 4, Delta 3, Golf class, and then the Hotel class. So I actually really wanted them to add this in by default. This is part of the mod, so it's kit bashed. It's got the hull of a Juliet, and then the conning tower of the Golf. But it's close enough. But yeah, I would really like an actual hotel in this game. It's just such a cool looking boat, because it has the sort of old-fashioned bow. So it doesn't have the actual teardrop hull that a lot of the other submarines of that era started to gain. But it was a nuclear sub with ballistic missiles. It's like a weird sort of stepping stone between the old and the new. Then you've got your Red October, designed as per the movie specs. Well, that's the conventional drive version. Then you've got the silent drive Red October, as per the movie specs. And then you've got the actual Typhoon. But, if I just look... If you look at the actual model of Red October from the movie, the tail's different, because it was only based off what NATO knew of the Typhoon at the time. And so they didn't quite know what the arse end of it looked like, because it was never out of the water, right? When this thing's sitting afloat, surfaced, this white line is the waterline, so you never see the tail end of the submarine unless it's in dry dock. And the Soviets obviously went to pains to make sure that the Americans didn't see this thing in dry dock. And yeah, you can definitely see the influence from the German Electra boats in the immediate post-war Soviet subs. It's very obvious. So this is a Typhoon, but launching cruise missiles, which I believe they modified one or two of them to do about a decade or two ago to keep them in service in some useful capacity. Then you've got your Yankee, Charlie 1, 2, Echo 2. Actually, there was an Echo 2 hull they used for the hotel class, my bad. With pieces of the Juliet. Oscar 2, this is what Kursk was. It was a cruise missile sub. Fat boy. Quite a big sub. Papa. Ooh, ooh. This is the big boy. This is K222. This thing is turbo fast. Look at this shit. 44.7 knots. Test depth 1,312 feet. This this boat is fucking ridiculous. Absolute unit. They only built one of them though. It was an experimental design. So the Soviets had a couple of subs like that where they only built one. There's like some weird super capable design that they only ever built one of. And that was just a side effect of the way they would design all these crazy things and then build one or two to see if it worked. Whereas the Americans would just design it in theory, say, oh, it's too expensive or it won't work, and then abandon it. We've got some surface ships too. I really like the look of the Cold War Soviet surface ships. They just have some pretty sleek lines to them. The destroyers especially. And then these little guys, the Kotlins, they're adorable. If you play World of Warships, you might recognize this. This is essentially what the Grozovoy is, but missing one of the main gun turrets. The Grozovoy is a follow-on design from the Neostrashimi, which isn't in this game, I don't think. But was, like the Neostrashimi was basically this, but stretched. And that was a one-off as well. Yeah, the models are pretty good. Like, graphically speaking, the game isn't going to set the world on fire, but they've taken what they've got and run with it. One of the lead artists for this is actually a friend of a friend, which is how I found out about the game. I just wish we could import custom models because it would make the modding scene a lot more active, I think, and it would make playing with the modded ships and submarines a lot more interesting. I haven't actually tried any of surface ship stuff. I think it's kind of, from what I can tell, it's kind of janky, like watching videos of people doing it, because this is, at its core, a submarine game. But it's janky but workable, as far as I'm aware. We've got some merchant shipping as well, for, you know, war crimes and convoy sinking. Well, I say war crimes, I suppose convoy warfare is pretty legitimate in a time of war, but... Got your helicopters as well, and the Tu-142, which we have seen quite a lot of in DCS lately. And the maritime patrol aircraft and helicopters are a real bastard. Like, they can make your life a living hell. You got all your different torpedoes. Then... This is an anti-ship cruise missile, so you can actually fire these from some of the submarines. And then this is one of the Soviet ASROCs, or sub-ROCs actually. I think their submarines can fire these. Yeah, submarine launched standoff ASW missile. So the nose is a UGMT homing torpedo, and the tail is a rocket booster. And then you've got the shipborne version, which is just a little kind of drone that drops off a UGMT. This is a sub-launched anti-ship missile. Got a couple different versions of it. A bunch of different versions of it, actually. Including the real Gucci modern stuff. What was that? Oh, Starbright. This thing looks badass. Look at the fucking boosters on that. That's awesome. And if we go back to the alpha... Yeah, test depth, 2,000 feet. 2,000 feet. Thing is ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. Anyway, I think that will do for Cold Waters for now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a break and cut the stream, find myself something to eat, chill out for a little while, and I will probably be streaming again in somewhere between 2 to 3 hours. I'll probably be just doing more DCS, I think. So hopefully I will catch you guys then. In the meantime, I'm going to head off to watch Tawny for a bit while I eat. Hopefully this has been interesting, a little something different than usual. And I will probably try and get some more Cold Waters in, amongst other things. I do want to start playing more games on the stream. I've been on a real DCS kick lately, but there's other stuff I want to get in as well. Either way, I will catch you guys later. Thanks for stopping by. And I will send you all off to Tawny, since that is where I am going anyway. Right, there we go. Raid is set. Oh, looks like he is in the... Was that the Harrier? Hornet? I can't tell. Harrier, I think.